Hello everybody, or should I say hello Holleufer's, because that is what you have named you guys. So instead of you guys, it is Holleufer's. So hello Holleufer's. If you're new here, please go down, subscribe, join the Holleufer family, and if not, that is totally okay. Another thing, this is my 100th official YouTube video, and it will be just as special as every other video I make, because that is how original I am. So if you're new here and haven't watched the other Lasius Niger episodes, there's a playlist in the description so you can watch all 5 videos, or maybe you just want a little recap, there's also a recap in the description. So if you hadn't watched them, go watch them now. And welcome back, you have now watched all the episodes, I can imagine. So before we start the video, again, a little bit of a long intro, and in general this video is long, but there did happen a lot of stuff during the hibernation. The 3 bee colony did lose 1 queen, and now they're just down to 2 queens, and nothing have happened. So therefore I've decided to just take them out of the experiment, still keep them, see if anything happens. If not, I don't want to say anything about them. And also the 1A and the 2A, also just kind of 1 queen colonies, and nothing really special happens with them at the moment. So in this episode I will only talk about the 3A and the 2B colony, but mostly focus on the 3A colony. And with that all out of the way, welcome back to Ant Holleufer, and welcome to the episode number 6 of the Lasius Niger experiment. So this right here is colony 3A, and as I said before, we are mainly gonna focus on this colony today. And maybe you can see it, maybe you're not really seeing it, but in my eyes this colony needs a new upgrade, because they are starting to grow out of that test tube. And as I've always learned, when you can't feed your ants without any escapees, it is around that time that you change from a test tube to a nest. So I could have changed for a test tube to a test tube connected with the outworld, but I thought that with all of this brood all over the place, that the colony wouldn't really be able to feed the young because they are beneath all the cocoons, and I know they can't, but in my eyes it seemed better for them to move into a nest. So that is what we are going to be doing today, but before we are starting the move, let's just look a little bit around the colony to see how it's going. So this is some of all the brood that we have all over the place. These cocoons right here is the final stage of the brood development before it is an adult ant. As you can see here, we have a lot of eggs and a lot of larvae and a lot of cocoons. So to tell a little bit about how it works, the queen starts by laying these really small eggs, and slowly they hatch into larvae, the small white dots with some black inside, that is the larvae. So while the brood is in its larvae stage, it needs a lot of protein, and that is why we feed ants a lot of protein. And slowly but surely the larvae grow to bigger and bigger size before it finally spins a little cocoon and becomes a cocoon. Other ant species does pretty much the same, but instead of spinning a cocoon, they just pupae and look like a little frozen ant. So I recently got the chance to try out some sunburst ant nectar, an original formula by Formica, I think it is the correct way of talking. And this right here is the first time I'm trying to feed it to my Lasius Nigers. You can see this worker's gaster is pretty full, which is good, meaning that the colony has a lot of food in their stomach. But I was actually surprised that not that big of a worker count decided to go over there. So while I was recording the colony, I suddenly noticed that the queen was suddenly trying to move, and the queen was suddenly going over towards the ant nectar. But after a little bit of thinking about it, she decided that probably wasn't her job. And it is really interesting because it is something I've never seen with any of my other ant colonies, but in these multi-queen colonies in the Lasius Niger experiment, the queens are a lot more worker-alike. In my 5 queen Lasius flowers, I don't really see this behavior, so I don't know if it's because the queen kind of knows she has to do some more, not quite sure. So if you have any ideas of why these queens act a little bit more like workers, please let me know in the comments below. But I thought it was quite fun that she walked over there, and it wasn't the first time. Some of the things I love seeing about these ants is their way to share food. On the left side we can currently see a little bit of trophollaxis going on. This is how the colony spreads the food from one worker going out and taking it from the sugar water and spreading it to the whole colony. So what they are doing right now is trophollaxis, and that is a form of transferring food from one ant to another ant. And they do this by having 2 stomachs, their own stomach and a social stomach. And these worker ants that are the oldest that move outside go out, fill up their social stomach, and after that they return to feed the rest of the colony. Now I tried to record a little bit of the workers feasting on this ant nectar, and I don't know why they didn't just kind of stop and sip. They normally do that with honey, but with this ant nectar they kind of just ran over, dipped their head in it and ran over to a new spot, dipped a little bit and ran over to a new spot, which made it very annoying for me to record. So the most impressive thing about this colony is definitely that all 3 queens are alive and they seem healthy. I'm still not sure that this will be the outcome after this year, and that is because it isn't normal for Lasius Niger queens to stay together. And to just interrupt me a little bit, you can now see the queen is even getting a little bit of trophollaxis. And this is, just to end that story, how the food gets all the way around the colony. But I am really impressed that all 3 queens are still alive. All 3 queens also seem healthy. I don't know how long this will go on, but it is really good for the time being. So last week I unboxed this aesthetic ants size small straight nest, and today we are gonna be hooking that up to the Lasius Niger 3A colony. I am of course going to water the nest a little bit to get the humidity up. And when you say a little bit, the first time you water a nest, it is always important to water it a little bit more as the sponge is completely dry. But after that they should only be watered with a few drops a week. So this right here is the Lasius Niger colony, and this is me connecting it up. So we didn't have any workers escaping, and that just means that I maybe have done this a little bit too soon, but all in all, I can't really feed them without escapees, so I think it is a pretty good time to start moving them into the first founding nest. So the thing that impressed me a lot was how scared the workers were to move in and out. They didn't enter the nest itself before almost 20 minutes. They just kind of walked around the tubing, getting a sense of if it was safe or not safe. But after around an hour, we had a few workers that had explored the nest for real. And with the queens connected and the workers going back and forward, I decided that it was time to call it a day. All the workers seemed really interested in the nest, though I didn't see any brood being moved just yet, but I decided that it was now time to call it a day. So while the 3A colony is hooked up to the nest and starts to move, let's talk a little bit about the 2B colony. This is our 2-queen colony where one of the queens sadly died, and this is how they look today. Definitely not as many workers as the 3A colony, but sadly they had a little bit of a hunting disaster a few months ago. And in that little hunting disaster they lost a total of 10 workers, and therefore it was a pretty big setback for the colony, as it were around 25% of the total colony. But as you can see in the background, I'm not quite getting the shots that I want, and I would really like to move these guys into the other ecstatic ants nest. But currently I just don't think that the colony is large enough. Luckily we do have a lot of eggs and a lot of cocoons. They are really good at hiding all the larvae, but I think they have a lot of larvae as well. But to be honest, I just don't really know what to update on these girls. I gave them a little bit of the ant nectar and it was really liquid, so it fell off this tinfoil dish and was now inside the test tube. And this is actually the second time I've had a little bit of a spillage in this test tube, so I think it is time for me to move these girls into a new test tube, but not yet time to move them into a real nest. But within not too long I am also hoping to move them into a founding nest, as I enjoy looking at ants in a nest a lot more than in a test tube, because you just don't really get the same glimpse of the ants. It is now the second day of moving my Lasius Niger colony 3A, and as you can see, the colony is busy trying to pull the queens. So overnight they have been quite busy when moving around half the brood. Clearly they haven't moved all of it, but they are trying to move the first queen. But as you can see, she is resisting and doesn't want to move at all. This is always a pretty scary thing to see in ant keeping, because I have heard stories about queens getting ripped apart when they are moving. This is more with Mesobarbarus colonies, but if it can happen to one species, it may as well happen to another species. She may not get pulled apart, but she may lose a leg or something. So I'm always really scared when moving my colonies. But all three queens just didn't want to move. They didn't feel like the nest was safe enough, so they just stayed back while the workers kept pulling them. But while recording the ants pulling the queen, a worker suddenly just popped up, took a larvae and just ran for it. And this is really impressive to me, because just that whole scenario from taking a larvae to moving to the new nest only took around 15 seconds. So these girls are really fast when they want to. And I was really happy when I saw this, but the queens just still didn't want to move. As you can see, the workers keep pulling a little bit in the queen, and suddenly she started to walk, but she returned again. Hello! So before I start the next part of the video, I should plug my Instagram, because this is my Instagram story you're gonna watch, because I didn't want to take my camera equipment out and just record all day. So I went in and looked at the ants for a bit, took some stories, and well, some exciting things did happen. So if you haven't followed me on Instagram, go ahead and do that now. If not, that's totally okay. But the next little part of the video will be on my Instagram, my story. Come on, the last queen has to be moved. The workers are pulling her, but yeah. No eggs remaining as far as I can see. Just one queen. And a lot of workers that wants to pull her. But she ain't having it. Is it gonna happen? Nah. Yeah, maybe now. Oh, come on, queen, walk, walk. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Halfway there. Not really. And that is the wrong direction. Come on. Oh guys, she's doing it. She's doing it. And nope. No. God damn it. Back to square one, I guess. So I just walked in. Queen is almost there. Three workers are pulling her. She just has to go right there. Oh no. She's backing up a little. So bloody close. So I got my chance to plug off the test tube with 0 workers inside. And well, now it's a job well done thing. So hopefully she's in next time I get in and check on her. Come on, so close. No, 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 don't return. Oh, oh. Perfect. Perfect. Brilliant. With all 3 queens finally inside the nest, I decided to hook them up to this little mini outworld connected to a test tube for water. So this is a really simple DIY outworld, just 2 holes, a hole for the nest and a hole for the water tube, and a little bit of holes in the lid for cotton. And the reason I did this is just because I don't want to stress the colony by feeding them in the tube, and I didn't want a big outworld either, so I just made this little mini outworld. And not long after, we had the first workers walking around. So I, of course, wanted to give them a little treat for moving into the nest, and that was a chopped up mealworm together with some frozen fruit flies. Now this was just in general a little experiment to see what the ants would prefer for the future, but the ants couldn't figure out how to get out of that tube. So they just kind of kept walking around, walking on top and inside, but they just couldn't figure out how to get down. But finally a worker did arrive to the food scene and started feasting on the mealworm. So I took a time lapse, and all the workers decided that, we're not gonna eat while he's recording. So I guess they were just busy exploring the whole outworld, and they were, as seen from this time lapse. But this is still the day that the colony moved into the nest, so I wanted to give them a day's rest before looking at the colony for real. And that is now today. So as you can see, overnight the fruit flies has been taken out of the dish, and one of the fruit flies have even been taken into the nest. I also gave the ants a little bit of ant nectar just to see if they liked it or not, and I didn't really get any response. So they may just be full on sugar, or they may not be that interested. But let's look at the ants, because that is what we are all here for. And here they are. So when I talked with ecstatic ants, we talked a little bit about where the queens would move, and all 3 queens have actually decided to all move into the same chamber. This is of course to protect each other and the whole colony being protected, but still, for the first time in their life, they can actually be completely apart from each other, but they still decide to stay together. And another nice thing is, you can actually now see the eggs, the larvae and the cocoons all separated. And that just in my eyes means that all the larvae are getting fed, because I just felt like it didn't completely happen in the test tube. So as you saw in the last second of the other clip, one of the queens decided to almost leave, and that is something I've noticed. 2 of the queens always seems to stay together, while the 3rd queen is often pushed a little bit away from the colony and is kind of staying a little bit away, and that just shows me that if one of the queens were to get killed or die, this would probably be her. But enough about the 3 queens. Right here you can see one of the frozen fruit flies that has somehow been carried all the way up and into the tube and into the nest. And you can see all the larvae are all placed pretty close to the fruit fly. And this is both so the larvae can feast directly on the fruit fly, but also so the workers can feast on the fruit fly and refeed the larvae right after. And this is something that I really enjoy seeing in a nest, that you can actually see that the larvae and the eggs and the cocoons are all separated, which is something that you just don't see in a test tube. On the right side we can see all the eggs pretty much stacked together, and eggs in general stick together, so it's easier for the workers to grab a whole pack of eggs to move them to the ideal location. And to end this video, you can see that yes, this nest is really big for this colony, and yes, I may have moved them a little bit too soon, but I hope that when all the cocoons hatch within the next 2 weeks, that the workers will fill the nest a little bit more up. But it is still really surprising how little space ants need. When they originally moved in the first day, I had a little sneaky peek, and the ants were kind of all over the place on the middle and the right side. But after a few days of getting a little bit more comfortable, they are only in the right side, where it is the highest humidity and the longest from the nest entrance. And yeah guys, that's been it for this video. I hope you liked a little bit of a longer video. It was really interesting following the ants from test tube to the nest, and a lot of things did happen in between. So Ecstatic Ants actually told me to say this because he wanted to know that his nests are not perfect. When the first workers starting to walk into the nest, they did find a little way of escaping on top of the mesh and into the cotton or the sponge thing. So I talked a little bit with Ecstatic Ants, disconnected the nest, fixed the problem and connected it again. It was a really simple solution with a little bit of cotton on the bottom of the mesh. But again, I didn't really see it as a big thing because it is a problem that has been fixed now, but Ecstatic Ants wanted me to say it, so I'm saying it, goddammit. But you know guys, if you enjoyed the video, please go down and like and subscribe, and if not, well, I can't say anything, but don't forget to like and subscribe, which I just said, but that's my outro, and I'll see you in another video.